The office was almost empty when it happened. Most people had already left, lights dimmed, keyboards silent, the kind of quiet that only exists after a long workday when ambition finally clocks out. Lucas remained at his desk, reviewing numbers he'd already reviewed twice, more out of habit than necessity. He was the kind of employee who stayed not because he was asked, but because leaving early felt like a betrayal of something invisible. That was when he heard the knock. Not loud. Not confident. Just firm enough to be intentional. He looked up, expecting a colleague or maybe security doing their last round. Instead, when the door opened, the atmosphere in the room shifted in a way he couldn't immediately explain. Onita stepped inside. She didn't smile. She didn't apologize for interrupting. She simply closed the door behind her. I've watched people long enough to know that when someone closes a door like that, they're not asking for privacy. They're creating a boundary that didn't exist before. Lucas stood up instinctively, unsure why his heart had started beating faster. Onita was the boss's daughter. Everyone knew that. She wasn't involved in daily operations, didn't have a title on the company directory, yet her presence carried weight. She had grown up around power, learned how rooms worked before she was old enough to enter them. She was 25, confident in a way that didn't seek validation. Elegant, but not distant. Beautiful, but not trying to be noticed. The kind of woman who didn't need to announce herself because attention followed her naturally. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her voice calm, measured. "No," Lucas replied quickly. "I was just finishing up." She looked around the office, as if noticing details she'd already memorized. The framed awards on the wall. The neatly stacked folders. The faint smell of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. "You're always the last one here," she said. It wasn't a question. Lucas hesitated. "I guess I like quiet." She nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something. There was a pause. Not an awkward one. A deliberate one. People underestimate silence. They think it's empty space, when in reality it's pressure waiting to be released. Onita finally walked closer, stopping a few steps away from his desk. Not too close. Close enough. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "I just wanted to talk." Lucas gestured to the chair across from him. "Of course. Please." She didn't sit. Instead, she leaned lightly against the edge of the desk, crossing her arms in a way that felt casual but wasn't. Lucas suddenly became aware of everything, the hum of the air conditioning, the ticking of the wall clock, the fact that his shirt felt tighter than usual. "I've seen you around for a while," she continued. "You don't say much." "I just do my job," he said. "That's exactly why I noticed you." That sentence lingered longer than it should have. Lucas had built his entire career on being invisible. Reliable. Replaceable. He believed that staying unnoticed was the safest way to survive under someone like her father, a man whose name alone could end careers with a single raised eyebrow. Onita looked at him with an expression that was difficult to read. Not curiosity. Not desire. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. "Do you ever feel like people assume they know you?" she asked, without ever actually asking. Lucas wasn't sure how to answer that. "I suppose that happens to everyone." She smiled then. Briefly. Not warmly. "Not to me," she said. "People don't assume. They decide." Another pause. I remember thinking, the first time someone told me a story like this, that moments like these don't feel dramatic when you're inside them. They feel slow. Almost ordinary. That's what makes them unforgettable. Onita straightened slightly. "I'll be direct," she said. "Because I don't like pretending." Lucas swallowed. "I don't want this conversation to be about my father," she continued. "Or about your job. I want it to be about honesty." His pulse thudded in his ears. "Okay. She tilted her head, studying him. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? The question landed heavier than expected. I don't know, he admitted. I try not to complicate things. That's admirable, she said. And exhausting. She finally pulled the chair out and sat, crossing her legs slowly, deliberately. Not seductive. Intentional. I'm going to say something, she continued, and I want you to listen without reacting. Lucas nodded. I don't want a relationship. I don't want expectations. I don't want anything public or permanent. She met his eyes. I want one night. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled into the room like a weight. Lucas felt his chest tighten. I don't think I understand. She exhaled softly. I think you do. Silence stretched again, thicker this time. She leaned forward slightly. One night where I'm not someone's daughter. Where you're not someone's employee. No titles. No consequences. Lucas almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. No consequences, he repeated. Her expression softened, just a little. I said no expectations. Not no consequences. That honesty was what unsettled him most. Lucas stood and walked a few steps away, needing distance, needing oxygen. He stared out the window at the city lights flickering on as evening deepened. You shouldn't be asking me this, he said quietly. I know, she replied. That alone should be enough. It usually is, she said. But tonight, it isn't. He turned back to face her. Why me? She didn't answer immediately. Because you see me, she said finally. And because you look like someone who knows what it costs to say yes. That wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. I've always believed that temptation isn't about desire. It's about recognition. About being chosen for something you never asked for. Lucas rubbed his hands together, feeling the tension coiled inside him. You're putting me in an impossible position. I'm offering you a choice, she corrected. He shook his head. Your father is not part of this, she said sharply. Then, softer, unless you make him part of it. The clock ticked loudly now. Lucas imagined the headlines that would never be written. The rumors that would never need proof. The quiet looks from coworkers if something changed, even subtly. He also imagined walking out of the office tonight and never knowing what might have happened if he'd been braver, or weaker. Onita stood, smoothing her dress, reclaiming the space between them. You don't have to answer now, she said. I didn't come here expecting certainty. She walked toward the door, then paused, her hand resting on the handle. But I need you to understand something, she added. I don't make offers lightly. She opened the door, then looked back at him one last time. Think about what kind of regret you're more willing to live with. And then she was gone. Lucas remained where he was, alone with the quiet, the closed door now open, and the realization that some questions, once asked, never truly leave. The night outside looked the same as it always had. But inside that office, something irreversible had already begun. Lucas didn't leave the office right away. He stood there long after Onita disappeared down the hallway, staring at the open door as if it might speak back to him. The air felt heavier now, like the room had absorbed her words and was refusing to let them go. He checked his phone without knowing why, half expecting a message that would confirm this had all been some kind of misunderstanding. Nothing. He shut down his computer, gathered his things, and stepped into the corridor. The building was nearly empty, the lights dimmed to their after-hours glow. Every sound echoed more than usual, his footsteps, the distant hum of an elevator, the quiet reminder that no one else was around to witness the moment his life tilted off its axis. I've heard people say that big decisions arrive with clarity. That's a lie. They arrive with noise. Doubt. 100 overlapping voices telling you exactly why you should walk away and exactly why you won't. That night, Lucas barely slept. He replayed the conversation again and again, dissecting every word, every pause. He told himself it was a test. A trap. A reckless impulse she'd regret by morning. He promised himself that when the sun came up, everything would return to normal. It didn't. The next day, Onita didn't appear at the office. Neither did the day after that. No messages. No hints. No pressure. That silence was worse than persistence. It gave Lucas space to imagine, and imagination is far more dangerous than reality. He tried to focus on work, but something subtle had shifted. The office felt smaller. Conversations felt louder. Every closed door made his pulse spike. He became acutely aware of how fragile his position really was, how quickly years of loyalty could be erased by a single rumor. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else. Curiosity. By the fourth day, Lucas told himself he'd made his decision. He would say no. If she returned, he'd shut it down calmly, respectfully, and permanently. He rehearsed the words in his head, practiced the tone that would make him sound firm but not offended. That afternoon, his phone buzzed. A single message. Unknown number. Still at the office late. No name. No explanation. His chest tightened. He didn't reply immediately. He stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was counting down something invisible. Finally, against every instinct he trusted, he typed back. Yes. The response came almost instantly. Good. Don't leave. There are moments where your body reacts before your mind catches up. Lucas felt it then, the quiet certainty that whatever happened next would divide his life into before and after. When the knock came, it sounded exactly the same as before. Controlled. Intentional. She stepped inside, closed the door again. This time, neither of them pretended it was just a conversation. They didn't touch. They didn't move closer. The tension between them did all the work. Onita spoke first, her voice softer than before. You look like you've been carrying something heavy, she said. So do you, Lucas replied. She smiled faintly. That's fair. There was no speech. No negotiation. Just a shared understanding that whatever line existed between them had already been crossed the moment he answered that message. What happened that night stayed between them, not because it was secretive, but because it didn't need explanation. It wasn't reckless or dramatic. It was quiet. Intense. Charged with the kind of intimacy that comes from knowing something can never be repeated. And that was the problem. The next morning, Onita was gone before Lucas woke. No note. No message. Just the faint impression of someone who had already decided how this would end. At work, nothing changed. And yet, everything did. Onita stopped visiting the office entirely. Her name came up less often. Lucas was promoted 2 months later, a modest raise, a title adjustment that felt undeserved and impossible to refuse. No one said why. No one had to. I've seen how silence can protect people. I've also seen how it suffocates them. Lucas lived in a constant state of waiting, for consequences, for exposure, for a moment when someone would finally look at him and know. That moment never came. What came instead was distance. One evening, months later, he ran into Onita at a charity event. They exchanged polite smiles. Small talk. Nothing more. She introduced him to someone she was seeing, her hand resting comfortably on another man's arm. Lucas realized then that for her, the night had been a moment. For him, it had been a turning point. He eventually left the company. Not because he had to, but because staying felt like lying to himself. He took a quieter job elsewhere, one without glass walls or power dynamics he couldn't escape. Sometimes, late at night, he thought about that door closing. About how easily a life could be redirected by a single decision made in silence. I tell this story because most people think temptation is about pleasure. It isn't. It's about identity. About who you believe you are when no one is watching, and who you become when someone is. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you for listening. Stories like this don't come with clear villains or heroes, just people making choices they'll live with forever. If this story made you pause, reflect, or see something differently, I invite you to stay with this channel. Subscribe, join us, and keep listening, because some secrets are too real to be ignored, and the stories that linger the longest are the ones that almost happened.